We're live post game. Timberwolves 117, Warriors 93. Ryan Kostecka, Michael Rand here from the Star Tribune. Ryan, the final score is lopsided enough. The game itself was a coast to coast win. All that said, still kind of had a weird feel. It felt like a Tuesday game in November against the Charlotte Hornets for whatever reason. It didn't feel like it had the playoff intensity, and maybe that has to do with Curry being out and the energy just being off. I thought Golden State played hard. Golden State just doesn't have enough scoring right now, and the Wolves kind of coasted in this one and put the foot down when they had to, which is kind of how you play in the regular season, not the playoffs.
I mean, you're right. I was here. I'm here tonight. I'm still here right now, so excuse the flashing lights all around me. But the game itself, the crowd was great. Don't get me wrong. The crowd was great. They were jacked. They were amplified. The Draymond sucks chant were hilarious. You guys always got to respect the fan base that still boos a guy 7 years later every time he touches the ball. But you said it perfectly. Between on the court, the game just felt like it was just a man game. November, no big deal. Whatever happens, happens. I do think the game the Wolves really took the energy out of the Warriors early with that 13-0 start. And then, the Warriors made a run in the third quarter with that lineup. I thought Kuminga was phenomenal for them tonight. That's definitely something to watch. We'll get into that a little bit. But Wolves answered back with a quick 5-0 run. Then so they're up 12. And they just coasted from there. There was never really a threat. It was different. Even like in game one, you kind of felt the Wolves, if they could just get that to 7, they might have had a chance.
Right.
This game, you felt the Warriors were going to run out of steam, and that's exactly what happened. And the Wolves answered the call when they needed to, but really interesting series. It's lost a lot of steam without Steph, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was a weird game. Ant didn't get going all that much until the second half. He had the injury scare with the ankle, misses part of the end of the first half. But as soon as they said on the broadcast, sprained ankle, questionable to return, I knew he'd come back because that's kind of how that was a good sign. Questionable and ankle, it's not too serious. This final line looks good. 20 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. He was a plus 21. It was really a team effort, and it was really a bench effort. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I basically blasted on this last show, basically saying give Jalen Clark all his minutes. Well, Nickeil had 20 points off the bench, leads all bench scorers. They had 44 points off the bench, 46 points off the bench, including 40 from Dante, and Nas. And that's kind of the story of the game because, Golden State played a bunch of guys too, but it's probably a bunch of guys they prefer not to play. The Wolves won the Pat Spencer minutes tonight, minus 20 for Pat in 14 minutes. Poor guy.
I know our intern Jake Epstein, Northwestern guy, lacrosse guy. He was heartbroken for that. He actually wrote a good story on Patrick Spencer. He did. But no, I mean, the bench was clear. I mean, it was good to see Nah really get going. I mean, we talked about if he's shooting the ball well like that, he's such a plus for this team. 40 points for them. Kuminga had 18. I think Jackson Davis for the Warriors came off the bench. He gave them a nice spark with 15. So the bench scoring wasn't as lopsided as you expected it to be, but it doesn't really matter for the Wolves as long as they're getting that kind of contribution from Nas, and Dante. They're very, very tough to beat, and that's what we saw tonight. I mean, those guys came in. They were a very steadying force. They answered the call every single time, and the Warriors just had no option. I do think, though, the Warriors might have found something a little bit, though, between having John Kuminga go off the way he did and Jackson Davis. It really kind of helped their offense a little bit more. So I wouldn't be surprised if those two really, we see a lot more of them moving forward. I think Kuminga might starts game 3 and plays some Quentin Post, who I'm pretty sure Post started the game, came out, and never checked back in. If I'm not mistaken. So.
He had 3 minutes. He was a minus 13. He was a club trillion player. He had 3 minutes and didn't do anything else in the box score. A club trillion player. Good for him.
There we go.
I mean, and some of the outlier stats that you just kept assuming would go the Wolves' way eventually. The biggest one, their own 3-point shooting. They were 16 of 37, 43%. I mean, that's, a little bit better than they shot during the season, but not an unreasonable amount that you would expect them to make at various points. And then Draymond, 1 of 6 from 3 after being red hot from 3, in the beginning of, these playoffs and this series. So you had a lot of things that had been kind of going against the Wolves where you're like, they can't keep doing this. And then well, it happens twice. You see the Celtics get beat twice by New York. You're like, well, maybe it can keep happening. Those things didn't happen tonight.
No, they definitely did not. It was, like I said, it was a weird game. I honestly thought the Wolves were going to win the blowout. I thought they were going to start out hot and just kind of put the nail in the coffin early and just close to it, which they kind of seemed to do that. A lot of credit to the Warriors for fighting back 10-7, but the Wolves just overmatched. They're too big, they're too strong, they're too physical, and like we talked about, when their shots are falling, and even then, a lot of their shots, they weren't necessarily wide open looks. Some of them were, but they were within the flow of the offense. And when it's in the flow of the offense, the Wolves have no problem taking contested threes. So it was good to see them drop when they knocked down 16-37, 43%. I don't know. I mean, maybe apart from OKC can compete with them, they're a very tough team to beat when that happens.
How is Golden State going to score? They had 93 tonight. No Steph. I mean, we were talking about Jimmy Butler, still a very good player, but I don't think he's at the stage of his career. He could prove me wrong. Obviously, when they go back to Golden State, he could go off, but he does not seem like he's at the stage of his career where he can just take over a game and get you 35 points. And that's kind of what they need right now, because nobody else on this team, outside of, you're right, Kuminga had a nice game, but still, you're not going to expect that every game. Same with Jackson Davis. Like, you're not going to expect that every game. Like, Jimmy Butler is your number 2 guy. I don't think they're terribly worried about him going off. They're worried about him distributing and keeping him from getting everybody else going. And, honestly, only 93 points for Golden State, 39 at the half. It was, it's going to be a struggle for them to score the rest of this series until Steph comes back, if he comes back, because he's out probably for at least the next 2 games. God, I just, he's cautioning everybody, like, hey, this could be longer. Don't, we're not going to rush this back, stuff like that.
I think, to me, this series seems like, I think there's a Jimmy game in this series. I mean, looking back against Houston, he had 25, 27, 27, and 20. And, the 4 games that he played that really mattered for them.
Yeah.
So he is capable of doing something with that. I mean, he's Jimmy Butler. I think he's, in my opinion right now, he's the best number 2 left over in the playoffs. He's not number 1, though. So if you're going to ask him to carry the load on a consistent basis, that's just not going to happen. That's why the marriage between him and Steph was so perfect and so idyllic. So if you're the Warriors, I mean, you talk about trying to find offense. You got to find it from, Buddy Hield 4-9 from 3. Kuminga was great. Jackson Davis gave you good minutes off the bench. But you need, Moody, Podziemski actually is the one who's got to get going for the Warriors. I think he's the key. So he had 11 points on 4 of 9 tonight, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, solid game. He was +1, the only guy.
Right.
Yeah, but he's got to shoot the ball more. He's got to get going offensively. And I think the strategy for the Warriors at this point in the series with Steph out is you've got to hang around for 3.5 quarters. If you can hang around for 3.5 quarters, and then all of a sudden you get it's Jimmy, it's playoff Jimmy time, whatever you want to call him. He's very comfortable in that. We're curious how the Wolves react in that situation against Jimmy Butler and against a defense like the Warriors. But the problem for the Warriors is they got to get there first. They got to get there to 3.5 quarters, and I just don't know if they have that in them right now.
No, because this game was trending toward that when they made that third quarter run.
Yep, exactly.
It was they got it back to 7, and you're like, okay, things are going to start to get tense over there. But the Wolves just went right back on their own run, got it up to, like, I think it was 20 or so at the end of at the end of 3. And then it's like kind of a foregone conclusion. I don't think it was more than 14 the rest of the way, and then it just got, even more lopsided.
Yeah, it was just,
so it was like, if they can get it there, but like they got to have the firepower to get it to be a 4-point game with 4 minutes left. And maybe they can muck it up enough in Golden State, hold the Wolves down a little bit, feed off the crowd energy, get some better defense, stuff like that. But the thing is, too, the Wolves play really good defense tonight. It wasn't just the Warriors not having the horses. Like, they were playing really good perimeter defense. The switching game is perfect right now. Like, they gave up a couple like weird, hey, just let them run down the middle of the lane and dunk plays, but 93 points. That's that'll play anywhere. So I'm skeptical of Golden State's ability to get enough offense in this series. I think really Golden State's modus operandi right now is try to win one of the next 3 games.
That's what I said.
Anyway, anyhow, and try to get to a game 6 where you've got three days off and hope that you can get Curry healthy by then.
Yeah, I mean, you look at when Golden State made that run in the third quarter, it was Jimmy time. Jimmy played great to start the third quarter. He really controlled the offense. He controlled the tempo of the game. Draymond was great defensively. And I think one of the big runs was Jimmy had back-to-back buckets, a mid-range jumper and a layup. Then he gets double-team, kicks the buddy in the corner for a 3. So there's a quick 7 points. So, like, what you see there, that's how the Warriors want to play overall, but especially late in the fourth quarter. That's kind of their bread and butter right there. But like you said, I don't know if they can get there. It's going to be really interesting moving forward. I do think, like you said, Minnesota played phenomenal defensively tonight. I thought Jaden was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
His defense was just, he was everywhere. I mean, he did a great job on Jimmy, and then he did a great job switching. The communication was really, really good for them tonight. I noticed, like I said, they gave up a few, miscommunications where the Warriors got easy plays in transition or, dunks down the lane. But as a whole, I thought they switched really. They communicated really well. Very impressed with them. I thought Randall was just offensively sensational tonight. A night when Ant, like I said, good stat line, but didn't quite have it. The entire offense ran through Randall. I mean, 24 points, 11 assists, 7 rebounds.
Yeah.
That's what you want to see from him, especially on a night when Ant just doesn't have the flow, doesn't really feel in the rhythm of things. When Randall plays like that, they're tough to beat. But the defense was the star tonight, I think. I mean, yes, the three-point shooting was great. That's huge. They need that, obviously. But if this Wolves team is going to be taken for serious, they have to lock in defensively every single game.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget, they held the Warriors to 99 points last game as well, too.
Yeah, that's true. They've had him under 100 both games, and you got Nickeil Alexander-Walker going, like I said, 4 of 6 from three-point range. That's big. Get his confidence going. He's definitely a confidence player. They need his confidence up. And it was a team game. Like you said, Julius Randle led him with 24, but then a bunch of other, he had 2 others at 20 with Ant and Nah. It's 16 for McDaniels, who was really good offensively. Again, he just gets everything in the flow, but he had 16 points on 7 of 10, 11 for Naz Reid, 9 for Dante DiVincenzo. Like this is about, maybe they might have wanted to score a little bit more, but 117 is plenty. Like this is about how they play when they're at their best. And like I said, like it felt like they were playing an inferior team a month into the season on a weeknight. That was how casual it felt like they could just dispatch the Warriors. And I worry that it won't be that easy, in games 3 and 4, and that they might, have to match their energy a little bit differently in those games. That this one, sometimes when things come a little bit too easy for them, it catches up to them eventually. But they are clearly far and away, as long as Ant's healthy, like the far more talented team right now, as long as Curry's out. And that's the point I was making after game 1 too. Is like, man, even though they lost that game, I was like, if Curry's going to be out for a while, like this series is still very much theirs.
It is. I mean, I think we talked about it. I said after game 1, you just said it tonight. The Warriors, your goal is to just win one of the next 3 games. At that point, Curry's got 10 days off. You're giving him the best chance to come back in game 6. 3 days off between games 5 and 6. That's the Warriors' best recipe for success. I will say, if you're the Wolves, there is, yes, you played well, you got the win, but in my personal opinion, there's a little cause for concern because if you want to come out and make a statement that, like, we have this series with Steph out, you didn't exactly do that. And I think it was a lackadaisical approach. I'm not sure, like, it just felt off. You expected them to come out.
Casual.
Yes. If you are a true title contender, you do what Oklahoma City did last night to Denver.
Yes.
That's what you do. You don't do what Boston did against New York and let the team hang around.
They were somewhere in between. They were somewhere in between there.
Yes.
They didn't obviously blow a 16-point fourth quarter lead and let a team come all the way back and go up 2-0. Like that series is crazy right now. The fact that New York was up 2-0 going back to New York, like I still don't put that one in the bank for New York yet. I think Boston's got a lot left in the tank, but obviously, right. Like there's the 2 extremes that we saw on Wednesday night. It was Oklahoma City blowing out the Nuggets, and then it was then you're right. It was Boston beating Boston losing to New York. So it was like, okay, which one were the Wolves going to be? And the worry was that they would be more like Boston. They were kind of in between. They did enough. They did enough. The final score probably looks a little bit nicer than how dominant they were, but in the end, it wasn't like they really had to. It wasn't really ever in doubt. Even if you would have liked it to be a little bit more comfortable, and could have sat guys for a whole fourth quarter kind of game instead of having to kind of make sure of it in the fourth quarter.
Exactly. There's a weird vibe to it. I'm not sure what it was, but they didn't make the statement I expected them to make.
No.
And that's a little customer. If you're the Warriors, you're leaving this game too thinking, cool, yeah, we lost, but hey, we got the split, and we kind of figured some things out with Kuminga and Jackson Davis as far as rotation goes. And you kind of took the Wolves' best punch in a sense, 43% from 3, great bench production. So the Warriors, you're feeling pretty confident. You're Minnesota, you're like, okay, we got to go handle business. I'm curious, though, the road, if this is where you need Anthony Edwards to be Anthony Edwards.
I think you probably do. And
so you have to have that effort from him in games 3 and 4 to win.
And he hasn't really had an Ant game since Game 4 of the Lakers series, right? It's been three in a row where it's either been okay-ish but not shooting great, or tonight. I thought tonight was better. He did what he had to do, but it was not a classic like Ant went and dominated game. He just kind of he was in the mix. He was in the flow. He came back from the injury, which was a big, I think, morale boost eventually. But yeah, he was not dominant in that game by any stretch.
I think the injury really kind of threw him off rhythm a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
I do think that he understands, and this is where his maturity is coming in, where we want to see him, take control, but he sees his bench guys playing well. He sees Julius playing really well. He has no problem deferring to them.
Right.
And I think this is the next step for Ant, I guess, and his evolution as a superstar is knowing when to take over instead of keep deferring to your guys, and knowing when to do certain things so you can stay in the rhythm of the game.
Yep.
Right? So that'll be the next step. I'm curious how he does in games 3 and 4. I grew up in the Bay Area. I've been to, Chase Center multiple times with the Jazz. It's an interesting crowd. It's I don't expect the crowd to honestly be that much of a factor. And, Dub Nation might hate me for this, but it's a very rich crowd now since they moved to San Francisco.
Yeah, it's different than when they were winning all the titles, right?
It's definitely different. I mean, I used to go to games at Oracle back in, the early 2000s where they pretty much paid us to go, my dad and I. We sit up in the rafters, and the Shake Oracle was incredible. That crowd was great. Now it's it's the hot ticket in town, and it's overly priced. So the crowd gets into it to start, but the second the Wolves, if they kind of seize control early and make a run, that crowd just dies. That crowd is very quiet, and I think if you're Minnesota, that's what you want to do. Take the crowd out of it. You expect the Warriors bench players to maybe play a little bit better at home, more a little comfort, back to their routine more.
I think that's fair.
But if you're Minnesota, you want to make a statement. You go in, you take games 3 and 4, and now you're looking at this completely different. You split 2 and 2, and it's oh boy. So we'll see what happens.
7:30 on Saturday. We will do this again post game. These have been tons of fun, Ryan. Great insights as always. Thanks everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you again Saturday.